Jeff, Jim, and Carmela. Part number 25. Carmela continued to call Jim on the telephone and talk to him at times like she was talking to her late husband Jeff. She would tell him how much she loved him and his touch. Jim began to go along with this because he was getting some satisfaction from the conversation too. Occasionally, Carmela would start talking to Jim, telling him she could hardly wait for him to come home to her. Several times she called Jim Jeff. Jim tried to convince himself to break this conversation off because it was going down a frustrating avenue. However, it was so intriguing he could not come up with the willpower to tell Carmela he did not want to talk to her anymore. Before long, Jim knew he had to do more than talk on the telephone. He began to have dreams about Carmela, and one night he woke up knowing he had to see her. The telephone conversation had now gone to Jim's apartment telephone, and she would call him after he arrived home from the radio station. She was calling him almost continuously when Jim was not working. They would talk for hours, and his conversation with her was as intimate as it would have been if he were Jeff. Jim was losing a lot of sleep, and at times the conversation was frustrating. Carmela withheld nothing about her and Jeff's relationship. Jim at times began to feel like he was Jeff. Before long, Jim started to fall in love with Carmela, and Carmela knew it and loved it. One evening, after Jim finished his program and was driving home, he decided he could not go on like this with Carmela. He had to have a closure or something. He decided he would end the phone conversations unless Carmela was willing to see him somewhere. Jim walked into his apartment and the phone rang. Jim started to speak before giving Carmela a chance to say what she had begun to say when he answered the phone. "Hello, this is the girl that loves you." Jim began to speak. "Carmela, I've been thinking about our telephone affair. This is what I have decided. You will not give me your address or phone number, and you continue to get to me with our conversations. I have determined you are probably an impersonator who is getting your kicks doing this telephone number with me. You are probably unattractive, and you are using your beautiful voice to cover up for an ugly person." Jim waited for a response and was very surprised at the response from Carmela. He had never heard Carmela laugh, but now she was laughing almost uncontrollably. This caught him by surprise, and he thought if she were not beautiful, she would not be laughing like this after he surmised she was ugly. This convinced Jim he needed to nip this telephone stuff in the bud, so he said, "Carmela, I don't want to continue with this any longer, and I don't want to talk to you again." When Jim said this, Carmela began to cry uncontrollably. If there is one thing a man has problems with, is a woman crying. Jim began to tell her he did not know what to do about this thing between them, and he did not mean to hurt her feelings. Carmela began to calm down, and she said, "Okay, Jim, I will call you tomorrow when you get in from work and tell you where we can meet." Carmela continued to sob as she told Jim she was madly in love with him. Then she hung up the phone.